Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the Four Direction. I'm your host, Mary Apollo. In today's episode, I have a special guest with me. Her name is Lisa Russell. She's an Emmy winning filmmaker award and also co founder of Create 2030, a nonprofit organization, and a global co chair of the UN Civil Society Impact Coalition on art and culture. Welcome, Lisa, to
Thank
host.
you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. How are you this morning?
I'm good. I'm in Mombasa, Kenya, so it's late afternoon, but I'm doing great. It's a little warm, but I'm good.
Oh, yeah, that's wonderful. I just want to take you to your journey. You have been serving in the United Nations for 20 years. Advocacy
Yes.
work, filmmaking. How does that feel after all these years?
I absolutely love my job. It was nothing that I had planned. There was no big, I'm going to be a filmmaker one day or I'm going to work at the United Nations one day. It kind of all fell together. And I have to say, all of the years of being confused about what I wanted to do, learning all these different skill sets, working in different sectors, it all kind of brought me here today. So I think it's gone really well.
Wonderful. Uh, Take you back to your childhood. I know you were born in California. You moved to the New York in the 90s. That time when there was the rising of the hip hop, you became a dancer. What was your early inspiration to artwork connected to what you are doing now?
So when I was young, I grew up in a pretty sheltered and it was a little chaotic childhood. I had a father who was incredibly abusive. I had a grandmother. She was an immigrant from China. We just had a lot of chaos in my house. And my mother was actually a really amazing artist, even though she never went to art school. She had only finished the eighth grade. She worked as a waitress. But I think without knowing it, she pushed me into the arts, pulled me into the arts, whatever it is. And through the arts, I think I really found my escape from the chaos that I was living when I was young. And so I grew up loving music. I was a dancer. I was in gymnastics. I played the accordion of all things. I used to paint and draw. So I was really, really into the arts. But I grew up in a generation where being an artist was not considered a real job. And I was the first person in my family to go to college. And so I didn't want to disappoint my mother, who made a lot of sacrifices for us to, me and my brother, to go to school, get an education, et cetera. So I thought, okay, well, I guess I'll be a doctor because I really enjoyed doing good in the world. So I was on a path to becoming a emergency room doctor and came upon a video of somebody who was very prominent in the UN space in the 80s and 90s. His name was Jonathan Mann. He was the founder of what is now known as UNAIDS. It was then the global program on AIDS for the World Health Organization. And he was really a pioneer in looking at health as a human right. So when I heard him talk about HIV and AIDS, the global pandemic was still, like growing and was still fairly new. There weren't any antiretrovirals or medicines to help people who are HIV positive. He really made the link between what we call social determinants and health. So gender, ethnicity, income level, educational level, all of these things impact people's health. You can see in America, for example, African Americans have higher rates of diabetes, of heart disease, et cetera. And that really pulled me. That's what I wanted to do in medicine. Being an ER doctor to me wasn't about doing lab tests and the science and the technology behind it. It was really about working with people. And that is what I wanted to do. And so I got interested in global health and landed my first job in Kosovo. And it was really there that I got the passion for wanting to be a storyteller, because I met these women from Kosovo who were refugee women who had said, we're really unhappy with how the journalists are coming into the refugee camps. They want to tell one story, and it was the story which was about, and trigger warning about rape as a tool of war. And they said, and we don't want to be remembered as this. We're more than women who've been assaulted. So they said, we fear at the end of this war, we will no longer be remembered as Kosovar women, but as Kosovar women who'd been raped. And that just put something in my head that made me want to tell stories differently through a human rights lens, through an artistic lens. And that was the beginning of what would then become a 20-year career working as a contracted filmmaker and arts curator for the UN. And
So,
again, it was never planned. None of it.
wonderful. I just want to have a question here about, because when we talk about an artist, who is a person who is an artist? The
Yeah,
definition
that's
of.
a great question. That's a great question. I think we are all born creative. We are all born artistic. But as we get older, some of us kind of don't exercise that creative muscle anymore. And so those are the people who, whenever I say I'm a filmmaker, I do this, I do the arts in the UN space, they're like, well, I'm not really creative. Well, no, you are. You just haven't been practicing it. So I believe we all are capable of doing art. We are all capable of being creative. But I do want to recognize that when I use the term artist, I'm usually referring to people who have studied and mastered a craft. For me, it took me 3 serious years to become a filmmaker where I knew how to direct, produce, shoot, and edit my own films. And so when I say I'm a filmmaker or I'm an artist, it's not that I pick up a camera every now and then. It's like I'm fully immersed in the craft, and it's also my livelihood. So when I talk about, for example, artist representation at the UN, I recognize and appreciate there's a lot of people who do play music on the weekends, they write poetry, they do whatever. I'm usually talking about people who make a livelihood out of their art form, because these are the people who have needs and policies that need to be addressed to accommodate those livelihoods. It's being an artist is not just like a hobby. There are people who dedicate, in my case, years and years and years, and a lot of equipment sometimes has to be built. A lot of transportation needs to be covered because musicians, for example, are traveling all the time to go to shows. These are things that are different than what people might have to, you know, focus on when they have a 9 to 5 job in the same office in the same company. It's just a different livelihood. One is not better than the other, but it's sometimes hard for me to think that people that have a certain livelihood over here understand the nuances of what it's like to live and work over here. And there was nothing more clear to me than during COVID, when a lot of artists, most people I know, myself included, lost all their work kind of, in a matter of days. I lost 7 gigs in a matter of like 2 or 3 days. And learning how to then pivot and survive in that environment was a little bit different than people who had stable jobs, stable income, etc. And so these are just examples of, there a lot of us love the arts, a lot of us are hobbyists, but there's also a creative industry, people who work in the creative industries full time and have certain needs, like I said, and certain needs, certain voices, certain needs and wants, and all of that that I think we need to account for.
So, take you back. You are the co-chair for I Impact on Arts and Culture, a working group that established in preparation for the Summit of the Future. I went through the organizations like values that you have amplified creative voices, create this culture integration in policy, global culture exchange. Which groups are you involved in these activities? And do you give like Africans, more African youth to represent their voices in these international conferences and also in policy making process?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. So I've worked all over the world for my 20-year career, but during COVID, I got stuck in East Africa. So I've been living in Tanzania and Kenya for the most part for the past 5 years. And although I've always worked with African artists, like musicians who gave me music for my films in exchange for, licensing or shooting them, I now live here. So I really understand a lot more of the nuances that I didn't before. Just to back up, the Arts and Culture Impact Coalition was developed during the Nairobi conference that took place in May of last year by the Department of Global Communications. They had put out a call saying, we want to do this kind of experiment, is what they called it, to create sort of, I would call them like mini working groups. Mini impact coalitions aren't quite major groups, but they're mini groups. And they wanted to see if we could help fill in the slots that were missing in terms of what the major groups and these other stakeholders were accomplishing. So they put out a call. I submitted my proposal. Apparently there were 2 people that submitted something related to arts and culture. Mine got chosen, and they created a bigger group with faith-based organizations, and we became the Impact Coalition for Arts, Culture, and Faith-Based Communities. And when we got to Nairobi in May, me and the co-convener of the faith-based groups sat together and we said, we respect each other's work. We just think we have our own agenda, our own needs. So we decided to branch off into 2 separate impact coalitions. One of the great things was this was the first time this conference had taken place on the African continent, which means that just the flavor of the conference was so much more colorful. It was a lot of young African advocates, a lot of people from, neighboring countries, so many more than you would see if that same conference was held in New York or, Salt Lake City, wherever it was the year before. And so what was great for us is that word kind of got out that we have this impact coalition. And so as we were doing voting for our regional organizational partners, we actually had more African artists and African cultural workers submit than any other region. And I was very proud of that. We continue to have a strong African representation in our working group. My global co-chair is from Kenya. Our African regional operating organizational partner is also based in Kenya. I just did a music video with a musician from Nigeria. I think the creative economy, which is the term that people use for, nowadays, the sort of arts and culture, especially for practitioners, the African creative economy is skyrocketing, is booming, and we shouldn't be surprised about it. I mean, culture on the African continent was always about music or dance or theater and all of that. It's now becoming more formalized in industries. And so I do believe that arts and creative economy and creative practitioners can be the sector that pulls in a lot of African voices. And I hope that we recognize that and we make amends to ensure that that happens. I'm somebody, and I tell my African colleagues all the time, I'm like, all eyes are on Africa right now between the rise in the creative economy, the rise in sustainability on the continent. I'm like, I wouldn't be surprised if Africa becomes the next superpower in the next, 15, 20 years. That's my thought.
Great. I take you to the role of an artist in African communities, people who are supposed to work in African communities. There is other issues that concern in the African communities, like health, education, a lot of issues that need to be raised awareness of. How do you think an artist can work in that environment, and what is the important role that an artist can play in African communities?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yes, there are a lot of challenges on the African continent, worldwide, et cetera, and I'm biased, so I'm going to tell you my opinion. My opinion is that artists in partnership who can co-create with some of these other players in the development space, et cetera, can actually help amplify the important work being done and also the challenges that we need to overcome. I work on the international level. I know how things work. These large institutions that have huge budgets are able to, for example, hire PR firms, and they are able to get their agenda at the forefront of the whatever conference, whatever, because they have the money to pay for it. They have the money to put billboards everywhere, to get like things in people's faces, to be like, this is the issue that we need to focus on. This is the driving issue. And then you have smaller NGOs, for example, who are struggling for funding, who are doing great, important work at the local level, but because they don't have the same level of funding, may get overlooked. My argument and my feeling is that we can work with artists to change that narrative. First of all, if funders recognize that artists can act as sort of mini PR agencies, and at the local level, you can have partnerships between artists and organizations, and through that, create content that will help amplify programs, challenges, et cetera, et cetera. You know, for example, if there's a poet and there's a poet who wants to do something on food security, for example, and they combined together to work on an artistic project, not making the artist sound like the nonprofit's brochure, but actually create really powerful art. That art can get into other international conferences, can get into poetry slams, can get into films, festivals, etc. And then all of a sudden you have this like snowball effect of different entities, different people, different organizations getting attention that is well deserved. You know, I talk about this a lot in my work. We need systems change. The way the development community is working is just like, I just don't, I feel like it's mimicking sort of the corporate world where the rich are getting richer, the poor are struggling more. And that shouldn't be what humanitarian work and humanitarian aid is about. It should be about equality. It should be about justice. And we need to do things differently if that's the case.
Great, wonderful. So this is in the local level. How do you see Africans artists in the international level, representing in the international organization, and what skills and potential can they bring to the table?
So I'll give you a perfect example. I work, for example, with a farmer in Tanzania who is also a musician. He owns his own farm, grows his own, you know, he has cows, he has cuckoo, he has chickens, he does the whole thing. He creates cheese, he makes milk products, etc. But he's also a musician. And so he uses his music as a way to enter certain spaces to be able to talk about the work that he does around food security. There's also an incredible young poet that I work with, also from Tanzania, who has done a lot of stuff around gender equality. Their voices represent, again, the movements and the struggles and the opportunities at the local level in a way that maybe a researcher wouldn't be able to articulate or a program officer couldn't articulate. We need content, if that's what you want to call it, art, storytelling that actually moves people. Sometimes I go to some of these conferences or even the UN, I'm like, wow, like the work is so dynamic, but you all don't know how to communicate it. And artists are really great communicators. Not only that, but I believe it's because of our livelihoods. We're also creative thinkers and problem solvers. And why wouldn't you want minds like that sitting at a table, helping to create solutions to local, regional, national, international problems? I think working with artists is the untapped secret to creating a better world. I honestly believe that. And the only thing that is keeping us from actually achieving that is that now everybody wants to do arts and storytelling, and we need people who actually understand and work in these arenas to lead this movement. We need museum leaders, we need artists, we need people who run artist collectives actually driving this movement in the UN. And instead, we have people who are the same, like former UN people, former NGO people, coming from communications into the arts, and those are two very different things. So all we're doing is repeating the harmful narratives and the harmful systems that existed in the past. We need new energy, new ways forward, more artistic and emotional storytelling. And I think, I think that's something that is so valuable, but under recognized.
So I went through reading your blogs. You say like one of your blogs, this system, this international organization system is not built for artists. And I found like it's always challenging for artists to complain that they don't have opportunities in the international organization or reach their target and goal.
Mhm.
What is so difficult for artists to find these opportunities, and what strategy should they follow so they get into these opportunities as well?
So I would say the answer is actually just the opposite. I don't think we need to put that responsibility on the artist. I think we need to change the UN system and the international community. I think if you want to get more filmmakers involved, have a program, an initiative, a working group led by a filmmaker, because I know how to reach filmmakers. I'm in all the spaces that filmmakers are in. They know me, they trust me. We have conversations. Sometimes when you work with artists, they don't trust institutions, and rightfully so. Some institutions, the government has not been super friendly to the artistic community. So instead of trying to be like, okay, learn how to come into this conference and be on this, WhatsApp group or whatever and speak this language, I actually think the development community needs to put more people like me who know how to speak both languages, how to straddle both arenas in order to be able to say, okay, we want to get poets. I know where to go to get poets. And I know how to talk to them in a way that will make them interested. Sometimes I've had organizations literally write to me and be like, even this happened during UNGA 5 times. We're looking for a poet, a performance poet. I'm like, first of all, like, I'm a curator. If you want me involved, bring me on as a curator. Secondly, it's not just like, let me hand pick a poet and throw them on your stage. I intentionally find poets that I know because I've studied their poetry, their artwork. I know who they are personally. I know what drives their writing and what makes their poetry authentic. I'm going to put that poet into an event that amplifies what they do. I'm not just going to be like, oh, they're a good poet, let me put that poet there. I mean, it's common sense to me, but maybe not to a lot of people. And I do feel a lot of the struggles that artists experience mimic those that young people have experienced over the 20 years that I've worked in the UN space. There was no representation for young people, and they have fought hard to get youth pre-conferences, a youth envoy's office, a working group for young people. They've overcome many of the obstacles that artists are still facing when it comes to tokenization, unpaid work, all of it. And so I feel like the artists don't need to change. We don't want them to change. They need to continue to do what they're good at. What we need to do is change the systems that want to engage with artists, and that starts with having real artist representation. I could rattle off so many harmful policies and programs and arts contests, so many that could have been avoided if they had an arts, like a working group, a formal working group that would vet campaigns, this, program, etc., policies, all of it. It's the basic argument for representation. You don't want adults making policies on behalf of young people. You don't want men making policies on behalf of women. We shouldn't be having non-artists make policies on behalf of artists. Representation matters, even for artists.
Wonderful. I have a question here, like for how do you think we can
Oh, I lost you for a second.
programs for young people, and it should be like improve, comprehensive for these young people representation, and also there is important issues like when they want to address issues like the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, issues that matter to young people.
I think I dropped you for a minute, so I'm not sure what your question is. Could you repeat, please?
How can we have this program designed comprehensively to engage young people? How would the big picture look like?
So I again, I'm biased, but I feel like we need to formalize this working group. This impact coalition should become a formal working group. We should be able to write an agenda that is written by and for arts programming, arts policymaking, etc. And there are many, many youth artists who are professional artists. Most of the artists I work with Create 2030 are under 35. They do fall in the youth categories. So, and they are professionals. They may not have gone to school for poetry or filmmaking or whatever, but they're working full time in the industries. They're surviving as artists. And these are the people that should be leading the arts and culture movement, not people who have a regular job and enjoy arts on the side, not people who all of a sudden are like, oh, I want to be an artist or whatever. It's like, it's again the same. It's what representation actually means. If you're sitting at a table and you're using the word they, like they need this, or we should do this for them, or they have asked us for this or whatever, instead of the table saying we need this, we think this, we would propose this, then you need to step aside and let the people whose livelihoods matter speak on this. So in terms of driving a youth agenda, we are launching a youth arts residency to attract young artists to learn about the SDGs, to get involved in some of these international conferences. We're hoping to do so, relatively early in 2025 so that we can get young artists, hopefully, accredited and attending COP30, because there's a lot of young people who are passionate about climate change, and really building the movement from an artistic point of view. I don't want to go into it again and again, but it's sort of like I've seen some of these training programs with British Council, with this, whatever, and I feel that it we can't expect artists to come sit in 10-hour day conferences. That's not where artists congregate. So you need to let artists design, develop, execute any kind of program where you want to attract young people, young creatives, etc.
Mhm. So here you are an Emmy award-winning filmmakers and you screenwriters. So you also work tirelessly advocate for inclusion, diverse in the international development effort. I watched some of your award, uh, some of the movies. This She-Vex empowering women farmers in Africa. The movie was really powerful and it's really made that impact on me. The message that you want to
Right?
send.
Mm.
You develop all these communication skills. How do you represent yourself when you go to the international conference and you sit on the table? I'm just curious about that.
Well, I think most people would probably say I'm a little bit of an agitator. I am not a cheerleader for any organization or any UN agency. I am there to push, obviously, by now, artist representation and the power of storytelling. I've managed to make a career, as I mentioned, in this space for 20 years. So I really know how to take an issue, a message, a campaign, a report. In the instance of She-Vex, the issue of women farmers needing to be trained on, small women farmers needing to be trained on livestock vaccination and the cold chain, and make it a human story that could have easily been a very technical, especially because it was a university-led program. I could have definitely made the film where there's a bunch of experts talking about this and that, but that's not what moves people. If you want to read a report, go read the report. But let us creatives and storytellers and artists help translate that so that we can get other people outside of the space engaged, informed, etc. I think that storytelling and arts allows us to be so creative that you're able, like I did a climate change AI film based on a space station where these climate hackers are hacking in to the virtual tour, these indigenous climate hackers. And it's like wild, right? It's like, what is this? Like, what did you come up with? But I think that's what we need. We need that kind of energy, that creativity, that artistic interpretation. The climate communication space is killing me. Like, to hear climate change presented the way that it is, going to the Africa Climate Summit, I was just like, this is not it. You're complaining that we have all these climate deniers and this and that and that, whatever. I would argue that part of it is because we are not standing up to the narratives that big oil and some of these, people who want to squash the climate movement. We don't have the equivalent to offset those harmful narratives. And that's what we need. We need powerful storytelling, powerful arts. So yeah, Shivax is one of, I would even say there are other films. I made a film for GE Healthcare called Heroines of Health, and that was really character driven. Like, I didn't mention nothing about GE Healthcare. There was nothing technical in it, and it did really well. So, and I love teaching. So I want to teach young advocates how to do better storytelling, how to use AI to create AI art, to change the narrative of how we present these issues in the world. Yeah.
I think continue on your work, more emphasize African narrative and collaboration, reflecting your connection to the continent. What do you think other issues that need to be addressed? Take you from health, human rights, sustainability. This is the issues. What other concern issues that people have to put more focus on it?
So one of the main topics of COP29, where my film screened, my new music video screened, and I was supposed to go, but I didn't go, and I'm happy I didn't go because I would have been really frustrated, was the loss and damage fund, and how the consequences of the rich countries not investing in this fund are going to play out on the African continent. Africa has generated the least amount of, carbon emissions, but is going to bear the brunt of climate change. And this is where I'm going to get a little political, but bear with me. So some people will argue that I shouldn't make films in Africa, for example, because I'm not African. I'm American. And even me, I struggled with this for many years of my career. I almost quit my job like 3 times because I couldn't figure out if I was doing harm or if I was doing good. I knew that my films were raising money, that they were opening up conversations, that I was not perpetuating, poverty porn is what it's called. But since I'm not African, am I being irresponsible for telling African stories? This is where I've come to it after doing a lot of work internally and also understanding systems that keep Africa poor or previously poor: colonization, patriarchy, white supremacy, capitalism. These are all systems that were built off the exploitation of other people. Now, if we truly want an equitable world, we can't just tell stories about Africans smiling, for example. Like, that's not the issue. That's not the solution either. We don't want to tell all these stories that we used to tell about Africa, with the kid with the big belly and flies in their eyes and war and sickness and all. That's not the answer. But the other answer is also not telling stories about African people smiling. There are nuances that we need to address. My argument is, in addition to supporting and amplifying African filmmakers, African storytellers to tell their own stories, those of us that work internationally also need to be making films about the systems that exploit Africans. So I can still make a film about climate change, but trust me, my climate change video is going to address some element. Like my previous music video that premiered at COP29, I addressed visa injustice. There's an image of a US embassy worker with a visa stamp that said visa rejected. And that is a system that also needs to change. There were so many young African advocates and even artists who wanted to go to the Summit of the Future. They had the funding, they had the means to go, they couldn't get the visa. This is also something that systematically needs to be addressed and changed if we're honestly going to have Africans having a seat at the table. We can't say we want young Africans involved, your voices matter, and all of this, and then be like, oops, sorry, you can't come to New York or Bonn or Geneva. That needs to change. So I'm now at a point where I've resolved this issue that I struggled with, which is I'm not going to go out and tell African stories just to tell an African story. My responsibility is to tell a story about Africa addressing the systemic issues that are keeping Africa from progressing. Trade is a huge part of it, huge part of it. You know, the Berlin map, there are people who don't know what the Berlin map is. That had a huge impact on why Africa is the way that it is right now. The war in Congo over, you know, some of these minerals, we are partly responsible for that. And if people in America don't realize if they buy a new cell phone every year, they're perpetuating this war that they're seeing, that they claim they want to stop, they're not addressing the system. And yeah, I could go on and on about that. But given the state of the world right now, where the rich are getting richer, and I'm from the US, and we're going to see a lot of this in the next 4 years, the rich are getting richer, the poor are struggling more and more. And eventually something's going to have to break. It's not sustainable. We cannot continue this thing. In America, people are homeless, they can't afford rent, they can't buy food, they're getting shot, their kids are getting shot in schools, the police are, there's a lot of systemic problems. And meanwhile, these rich people are just getting richer and richer and richer. It's crazy. So when you work in development and you're not thinking about systems, and if you're an artist or storyteller in the UN space, you need to be thinking about making films about systems change. Then you are exploiting your privilege on the continent. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that was a powerful one. I want to take you to you are the founder of 2030 nonprofit organization, an initiative to create diverse artists with international organization and the UN to change to open opportunities for storytelling and representation. And also the chief of AI in VOI. Uh,
Mhm.
know how this initiative will be able to change the scenario and open opportunities and doors for Africans artists in the international stage. And you don't think
Sure.
also it's too early to get the AI involved in the system in the African narrative?
Yes. Yeah, great question. So my role as founder and the main curator of Create 2030 is working with different UN entities, mostly high level, ECOSOC, you know, the UN Youth Envoy's Office, UN DESA. I've worked with a lot of the major, you know, secretariat even at the UN. And my role was to help bring artists into conferences, you know, the high level political forum, UNGA, all of these places to help provide an artistic translation again of themes, reports, etc. That was not going to be sustainable because they never paid us. I didn't get paid, they didn't get paid. Very rarely, some people did pay us, but very rarely did we get paid. And I was also always being told, we don't have a budget, we don't have a budget, we don't have a budget. But when I said, listen, I want to find the solution, I couldn't get a meeting. I couldn't get meetings. So it was a growing frustration of mine. And then when COVID hit, that's when I started to speak out. Like, you can't ask artists to work for free right now. You just can't. You can't put out a creative brief and ask artists to give you free artwork that you're going to give pro bono to mega corporations like Facebook and BBC. If you had a working group that could have vetted that, you could have probably stopped that, because there were a lot of people critical of that creative brief. Fast forward, there's not as many opportunities for me to curate artists because now everybody's doing it in-house, and the quality is suffering, in my opinion. They're not, again, curating. They're just saying, oh, let's put a poet on here. Let's get a poet for this event. That's not curating. That is just plugging in an artist to, it's tokenistic. AI, how AI is going to help bring African voices into the larger international space is that when you have access to the AI platforms and the computers and the Wi-Fi, you need all of these things. And I know from speaking at the SDG Digital that digital connectivity is still not where it needs to be on the African continent. Let's say we get to a point where it is, where we have good Wi-Fi, people have access to strong computers, et cetera. What AI is able to do with the right training, the right access, is to create films, music, photographs, etc., from the comfort of your own home. So I can create a whole music video with a song that I either made or somebody gave to me and create a whole music video using only my laptop and my fingers and my imagination. I don't need a camera, don't need a tripod, don't need a microphone. I can generate a whole storyline from my computer. And what that will enable us to do is for filmmakers, storytellers, artists in Africa, as well as independent artists and storytellers who don't have access to Hollywood or producers or big funds or music studios or labels, any of that. We're going to be able to jump over them because we don't need them. At some point, I will be able to create my 1.5 feature length script that I have not been able to produce because I haven't had an investor. I haven't had money to do it. It's going to make making movies a lot less expensive. I don't need to jump on a plane and fly all over the world to make a film about African women farmers. I could generate it in my computer. It's going to, as they say, democratize access to so many different spaces, whether it's music, film, the UN, etc. It's just right now, it's still at the beginning, and people need access, they need training, and we also need to have, more nuanced conversations about the ethical implications of AI, because people are worried about intellectual property rights and they're worried about the environmental impacts that AI can have. But I'm one of the creators that is a champion of AI, especially around art and storytelling for the SDGs, for sustainability, for all of these things. And I'm committed to figuring out how to make that accessible to the African artists and advocates and young people I work with, because their voices are the ones that need to be heard in these spaces. And this is a way for us to do that, getting over the hurdles of visas until those are figured out, funding, all of it. And so I just believe AI art and storytelling is just a wonderful opportunity for us to rethink and revolutionize the way we talk about a lot of these issues and whose voices get to be in the conversation.
So one of our training we did for AI, DG and storytelling. How can you teach these skills to young African people in the continent? And what would be like the main challenge that will face you under the ground?
Great. So, as probably everybody has experienced, there's great AI art and then there's horrible AI art. And the horrible AI art is one that can be easily generated without a lot of thought into the prompts or the creativity behind it. And we're seeing more and more and more of that. My LinkedIn is filled with really bad AI art. I feel there are 3 things we need to make really powerful AI artists and storytellers. One is that people need to be taught the craft of storytelling. So again, I'm a professional filmmaker, professional screenwriter. I know the professional story structure that I can teach, and I teach workshops all the time. So one is understanding the craft of storytelling. 2 is understanding the creative tools. There's all sorts of creative AI tools, and more are coming out. It feels like every week, more and more and more. text to video, image to video, talking mouths, this, that, whatever. There's so much going on. So you need to learn how to use the AI tools that are out there and how to evolve with them. And then lastly is the strategy, the storytelling strategy. You can't say you want to be, a storyteller for early marriage or against early marriage, for example, if you don't know strategically how to make a story that fits in that space time wise, and also understanding how things move in the UN space. I've over the years have met incredible filmmakers. They could blow me out of the water for sure, but it wouldn't mean that they would be successful in the development space because they might pitch a story that the UN was focused on 10 years ago. This literally happened to me. Somebody was telling me, I had this idea for a story. I want to go to India. I want to do a film about AIDS orphans and this and that. And I'm like, it's a necessary, powerful story for the UN. That was their theme like 10 years ago. And so you also have to know the strategy. And that's where I'm hoping my artsenvoy.ai program is going to take off, because not a lot of people know those three things all together. But that is what I'm going to teach, and that is what I'm fighting to give access for. So again, and one other thing is that my platform is not free. I didn't build this platform and then all of a sudden I can just use it. I'm paying somebody to allow me to host, which means I have to charge people to use it. Now, this is not something I want to do, considering I work with a lot of African artists and advocates. So what have I done? I'm saying to the global north people, if you buy a membership, you can add a buddy pass. You can make it so that it's accessible to somebody in the global south. If you take my weekend workshop, I'm going to give a free seat to somebody in East Africa or, another place that we're focused on. So I'm also trying to figure out a way to make it fair and inclusive and affordable to people who may not be able to afford the fee that I have to charge. And I do think adding fees on top of what the global north pays is fair. It's fair. It's like loss and damage. It's like if you're a richer country, pay to accommodate for what the the lower income countries can't afford. Same thing with artists. If you're an artist from New York and you can afford $10 more to bring in an African artist, add that to your thing and we'll give them a buddy pass. And that, I feel like you'll get back the $10 in other ways by learning a new culture, maybe collaborating with somebody. You know what I mean? Like it's not just a one-way benefit. You're getting something back. Yeah.
So I have a last question. You are also in the advisory member of African Council for Foreign Relations and actively collaborate with the African youth through VXB climate advocacy programs. This is a rich program, and now we're talking about the AI and the work that the youth will be doing in Africa. I'm wondering what is the best way to collaborate between the youth in the continent, for example, and bringing these stories, working with the youth in the international platform.
Yeah, great. So both of those nonprofits I'm on the board of. So the FXB Youth Climate Advocates and the African Council for Foreign Relations. For the FXB Youth Climates, I've been working with them for a very long time, teaching storytelling workshops. So they run this incredibly 12-week, I think it is, free program for young people who want to become climate advocates or enhance the work that they're already doing. This woman, Karina Weinstein, who runs it, she is amazing. And we have worked really great together for years and years and years. My role with them is to amplify their storytelling skills in the climate space. So I'll teach an AI storytelling workshop, or I'll teach them how to create, short profiles for social media. That's kind of my role there. For the African Council for Foreign Relations, it's still relatively new, and about how we can focus an element of it on the African creative economy, which is why they invited me in the first place. I was pretty active in the chat, and I was talking about how, the African creative economy is growing, and I had a lot to say about that. So they invited me on that. Overall, I think We need more organizations that put artists on their board of directors, on their advisory committees, et cetera. And I really, again, think the United Nations needs to work with us to put together a working group made up of actual practitioners, cultural workers, people who work in cultural diplomacy, cultural relations can join us and support us. But I do believe it needs to be led by artists. And I think that if you are an African young person and you're interested in climate advocacy, definitely check out the FXB, Youth Climate Advocates Program, and more to come with the African Council for Foreign Relations. But they're two organizations I'm really honored to be a part of. And I never pretend that my role is outside of what I'm good at, which is teaching storytelling, talking about the creative economy, really pushing for a, artist representation and to create a really inclusive environment for practitioners.
Wonderful. So wonderful. That was really great. So I think I have a last part that I put here in the interview. I want to ask you about like what would you think the best things you have learned earlier before becoming an artist and getting into the international development work?
That's also a great question. You're giving me a lot to think about. But so people have often asked me, like, why do you want to get into this work? Like, what drives you to like run around the world, tell stories, be in really dangerous situations sometimes, work at the UN at high level places, and then the next day being in like refugee camps? Like, what is it? You know what I mean? And there's a quote that I think is very relevant, at least to me. And that is, if you want to find your purpose in life, find your wound. If you want to find your purpose in life, find your wound. And my wound as a young girl growing up in a very, very chaotic environment, I never believed the narrative that was being formed about me being a poor Chinese girl, with no father, like all these negative, like I ticked all the boxes. I had to stand in the line for free school lunch programs. Like I hated everything about being seen as a poor girl. I hated everything about it. And I knew I was really smart. I knew I was really creative. And I never owned that narrative. And so I think for me, meeting the women in Kosovo who didn't want to be remembered as women who had been raped touched something inside of me, because I understood that on a very like soulful level. Like I wasn't even conscious of it until years and years, decades later. But this is, I think, what drove me. And so I would encourage young people from Africa, whatever, if you follow where that thing is, that your passion, your purpose, if that's what you want to call it, if you want to find the place that heals the wound inside of you, pursue it. Because in my instance, it's led to great things. It has never been planned. I'm not rich. I don't have a lot of money, but I've done well and I've lived a great life. And I've done the three things that were important to me. I've traveled, I've been creative, and I've done good in the world. And I did not think that job existed, and I made it. I made it up. It didn't exist when I started. I created my own career path. And so I would just encourage you, even if you feel like, oh, I want to work internationally, but I can't figure it out and this and that, whatever, you keep going, because what may not be possible now, if you keep pushing forward, you may be the pioneer in like 10 years, which is literally what happened to me. I didn't see this as a career path, and I didn't have a mentor or somebody that I followed. I did it. And then I was considered a pioneer. And I look back and it's like, okay, well, what if I didn't do it? Would it exist today? Would somebody else have done it, or would have things just would have changed differently? So just because it doesn't exist, you don't know how to do it, you don't know where you're going to make things happen, keep pushing forward, because again, you may be at the forefront of something that doesn't exist. That's where innovation happens. You might be, your ideas, your dreams, your crazy thoughts about the future may not exist now, but maybe you are the one to make it happen, so that again, in 10 years from now, people are going to say, you were the pioneer, you brought that, and it didn't exist. And so, yeah, that's maybe the last thing I would say. I really want to encourage young people because I believe that young people really are the not I'm not going to say the leaders of tomorrow because that is not true. They are doing the work today, but I really feel like they are the ones that are going to change this harmful systems that we have.
So
Yeah.
the last section of the interview is only you have to answer with one word.
Okay.
What is your favorite Asian dish? Your favorite Asian dish?
I said SDG.
Your favorite Asian dish from home?
Oh, Asian dish. Uh, I can't answer that because I'm not I know more about Africa than Asia.
Okay, so then what is your favorite African dish? It can be
My
Kenyan dish.
favorite I just ate samaki. I
Samaki.
like
Fish.
yes, samaki.
Yeah. In Arabic, we also
Tilapia,
call it samak. Samak.
samaki.
Okay.
Yeah, samaki fish or tilapia. Yeah, so I just ate it actually before we jumped on a call.
Oh, that's wonderful. A word in Swahili. What will that be?
In Swahili,
Yeah, one word in Swahili.
one word. I like sawa, as simple as that is. I like sawa. I only know and kidogo because when people say you speak
Oh,
Swahili, I say kidogo.
that's really
Kidogo.
wonderful.
Yeah,
Uh, your favorite dance.
hip hop all
Oh,
day.
what is your favorite? It can be an artist or storyteller.
My friends.
Wonderful. What is your favorite movie from all what you have done?
Of my own
Yeah, of your
favorite
own.
movie. Oh, that's a hard one.
You
That is
have
a hard one.
you have a big list of movies. Yeah.
Yeah, but there, it's like when people ask me what my favorite country is, it's like every place has its own story and personality and whatever. So it's hard for me to pick just one. Like I like them for different reasons, you know?
Okay.
Um,
And
yeah,
okay. And SDG
17.
17 collaboration. Wonderful. Uh, I don't know what's like a favorite memory, a best memory that you have from working under the ground in film production.
I won an Emmy, but that is not my favorite memory. My favorite memories are when a young person who's seen one of my films or I've spoken or whatever comes and tells me that they've changed a direction in their life, that they now want to work in global health or they want to become a filmmaker. That's most important to me because that's what Jonathan Mann did for me when I was younger.
A word in Spanish.
In Spanish.
Uh-huh.
God, why am I blanking on my Spanish? You caught me on that one. Mi
Oh,
casa es su casa.
that's one I haven't know. Wonderful. One of your like most difficult time while working producing movies.
The most difficult time for me is probably in my whole career is right
Mm.
now. The contracts are less. Um, People are doing a lot more in-house. I'm very principled. So when I fight for artist representation, like I really mean it. And I've been blacklisted by a lot of people because I've spoken up, but I feel like I can't be authentic or genuine to myself. And that's why also I'm really excited about AI because I don't need as much to go and make a film. I can make a film in a day. I did it actually.
Uh,
Sometimes. Yeah.
Wonderful. An African country that you want to travel to.
Ooh, I like that one.
Yeah.
Namibia, Senegal, Mali. Where else do I want to go? Botswana, Zimbabwe. I mean, there's a lot. And, I've traveled a lot throughout the continent, and there's still so much I want to see?
Okay. Any international travel soon?
I'm going to Zanzibar for the Saudi Zabasura Music Festival next month. So, yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, that's so wonderful. I watched your TEDx and when you were
Ah,
talking about the memory of your mom taking you to school and dropping you. I just want to know about your inspiration. Who inspire you in this life?
Um, well, Jonathan Mann was definitely an inspiration. My mom inspired me, but not in the way that I think people think. Like she wasn't doing what I wanted to do. She sacrificed a lot for me to have a better life. And if she had not done that, I don't know where I would have been. So she was selfless and I skyrocketed because of that. You know what I mean? If she had not done that, I mean, my life, I mean, I say it not, I could have been a drug addict. Who knows? Like my life was really messed up. And I mean, thank goodness I found art. I found things that inspired me that I wanted to keep going, going, going. And my life turned out great, but it could have been bad.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
really wonderful conversation, Lisa Russell. Thank you so much
Yeah,
for.
thank you, Mary, and all the great work. I got to give it up to you too. I know you did a lot of like groundwork and research and asking me
I
questions. You were very thorough. So, also, congrats to you. That was great.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. I'm so amazed by your experience or your achievement also in life. Inspire me.
Thank
I
you.
just find arts like soon, and I'm also trying to find my way.
Good.
Thank you so
Good.
much,
Do it.
Lisa.
Do it.
I
Yeah.
want you so much. Filmmakers, founder of 2030 organization, co-chair of the UN Civil Society I Impact Coalition on Art and Culture. It was my honor to host you today in the Four Direction. See you again.
My honor also. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much, audience, for watching the Four Direction today. I was joined by Lisa Russell, the Emmy Award winning filmmaker, founder of Create 2030, and co chair of the UN Civil Society Impact Coalition for Art and Culture. I'm Mary Apollo, again, the host for Four Direction. See you in a different episode, a different topic about the issues that matter to global citizens. Send us your suggestions, send us by email, and follow our page. See you in a different episode. Bye.